and so that we have a chance to save this for those who may not have actually been able to attend. And like I said, welcome to today's topic. So we're going to be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, a journey of ongoing learning for each individual that's changing and evolving. The session will focus on addressing various questions. What does it mean for coaches? What is a coach's responsibility? What do clients expect to discover individually or in the workplace? What research is available to better understand diversity, equity, and inclusion? How informed do you need to be to coach clients? So how much of an expert do you need to be in the topic? The panelists will share their expertise and facilitate a dialogue amongst attendees. So one of the great things about having a panel presentation today is you'll hear different perspectives and different aspects related to the coaching field and to the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we're going to hear from three presenters today, and let me briefly introduce them. So we have Linda Secretan. She is a professional certified coach by the International Coach Federation. She is a coach who's interested in change, how it begins, where it ends, and how to support people as they navigate through its emergence wherever they find themselves in life's interesting journey. Her work draws from a deep well of positive psychology research to partner with clients in kind curiosity and good humor, discovering and sustaining the changes they desire. Linda is an ICF certified life vision and enhancement coach and a board certified health and wellness coach. She'll be addressing us first. Following Linda, we'll be hearing from Laura Alvarez Schrag. She is an associate certified coach with the ICF, and she is the founder and majority owner of Ponder Consulting, a world-class provider of a wide range of business training and development solutions and business consulting to address the complex needs of her clients in the nonprofit, corporate, public, and private sectors. Her extensive experience includes expertise in many areas, including executive leadership coaching, diversity and inclusion and equity, and organizational culture and development. She is highly respected for her work with organizations large and small in the United States and Latin America. Laura is a certified ACC executive coach through the ICF. She'll be our second presenter. And then our third presenter will be Dr. April Townsend. April is a developmental and transformational coach who is passionate and deeply committed to supporting the growth of her clients' leadership skills, supporting a personal and professional journey of self-discovery. Known as a trusted leader within local government, April spent 20 plus years in executive leadership roles, focusing on organizational and team effectiveness, leadership development, strategic leadership, change management, public sector budgeting, and policy development. April received her doctorate in education from Northeastern University and is certified as a social and emotional intelligence professional through the Institute of Social and Emotional Intelligence. You can see we have some well-qualified panelists today, and we look forward to hearing from them. As we go through our presentations today, as I mentioned, we'll hear first from Linda, and then Laura, and then April. What we'll do is, if you want to put questions in the chat, feel free. We'll have each of them present in succession, and we'll hold the questions from a verbal standpoint until the end. And then we'll allow about the last 15 minutes or so for an open Q&A. So we'll have a dialogue at that point, but we'll allow them to go through their presentations and then have the dialogue. If you got something burning on your mind, like I said, go ahead and put it in the chat, and that way we'll monitor that, and we'll make sure we cover your questions there as we go. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Linda to begin our session today. Thank you, Linda.
There, have we got it?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Paul. So I'm beginning today myself with more questions than answers, and I will end with more questions than answers. So navigating change with more questions than answers, where we'll go. And this is the general outline of what we'll be looking at. We'll start with a challenge and then the statements of our organizations, looking at the language a little bit, and then some issues and applications, and that's where I'll transition to a more personal application that I hope will speak to some of you as well. Okay, well, we're going to start with a story. This is a comp call that a friend of mine had. It was a friend, not me, although it might have been, years ago. The client was an authoritative Muslim male who came on strong. He dictated where, when, and under what conditions the coaching would occur. The coach said, my friend, no, I don't think would be a good match. The coach thought, hell no, no man will tell me what to do. Muslim men are prejudiced against women, and he could find me. He might be a terrorist. Well, I ask you to keep a mental tab as we go of what questions this raised for you. And we're going to return in the end to this partnership that never had a chance. I'm going to set a little context with the statement of our organization, the ICF Statement of Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging, and Justice, since that is the organization that unites most of us here today. The evolution was May 25th, 2020. You all will recognize as the day that George Floyd died. On June 1st, 2020, ICF issued a statement condemning racism and systemic inequality. On July 20th, they issued a revised Code of Ethics interpretive statements, which, as you remember, the interpretive statements are an ongoing comment on the Code of Ethics. This particularly regarded Standard 25 and 28, coaches' responsibilities to community. And finally, on August 4th, ICF issued a Statement of Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging, and Justice, where we'll focus for just a moment. I won't read the entire thing, although it's short, but I've highlighted a couple of phrases that stood out to me. ICF said, we must reflect on our blind spots and be aware of opportunities for improvement. We cannot ignore the challenges that many coaches and coaching clients face due to systemic problems in their communities. We will place diversity, inclusion, belonging, and justice at the forefront of every decision we make within our association. This statement was embedded in an announcement which also talked about the creation of a task force on diversity and inclusion, who was charged with creating an action plan to see what we are and what we are not doing as an organization to promote these values. And I'm sure that they'll be filling us in on that task force as we go along. There's also a statement from the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches. I imagine many of us are here share with me an interest in wellness, health and wellness coaching. Their statement was on June 18th, followed not most recently by an anti-Asian violence statement, but it was couched as acknowledgements and commitments. I've selected only a couple of each to share with you. Acknowledgements, we have blind spots. Our healthcare system treats people with marginalized identities differently, and we have much to learn about health disparities and social justice. The commitments, a couple of them were to listening to BIPOC communities and to seek guidance, to creating a permanent health and wellness coaching diversity, equity, and inclusion committee to review processes and develop solutions. It's a lot of language, a lot of repeated language, a lot of terms that we've lately thrown around like as easy as it was salt and pepper, but they're not, are they? So as we go forward and to prepare the way also for April and Laura's presentations, we thought it'd be a good idea to focus on just a few of those terms, and I'll just highlight 4 of them here: diversity, equity, inclusion, and finally privilege. Diversity may be viewed as the presence of differences that may include race, gender, sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, religious commitment, political perspective. Equity may be viewed as fair treatment, access, opportunity, outcomes, and advancement for all people, striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of groups with differences. And you can see from the illustration that equity is not the same as equality. Equality starts from the famous level playing field, or in this case, equal number of boxes to reach the fruit. Whereas equity levels the field by providing more opportunities. But if you take a look, to the people on the right-hand side still have more steps to climb. And if they did not have those steps to climb, it would move us further towards justice. Justice addresses the systemic cause of inequality by fixing the leaning tree. In this case, many of you will recognize the allusion to Shel Silverstein's Leaning Tree book. I like this very much, and I thought you might like it too. It is open source, and I put the link to it in the resources, and Paul will have included the resources probably in the chat, or he will. It's Tony Ruth Equity Series 2019, but you can see the progression that can be made towards equal opportunity, access, and justice for everyone. We talk about inclusion, and there's a difference between that and diversity, which we began with. Diversity is not that hard to achieve. In some way, you can have one of each in your organization, whatever diverse population you're aiming for. But for inclusion to occur, those who feel different also must feel and be welcomed. The outcomes will have been met when all people can participate fully within an organization or any group. And the final term, privilege, the advantage of being seen as the norm. This is the air we breathe, whatever group we are in. We do realize some amount of privilege. This is the benefits, assumptions, and courtesies that accompany the, quote, dominant group. And every group is dominant in some way, in some space. However, this really has a lot of traction with what Peggy McIntosh identified over 30 years ago. She wrote an article calling White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, with which many of you may be familiar, and there's a link to that, of course. She lists 46 of her own everyday advantages as a white woman, and this grew out of her research into feminism. And she began to realize, wait, it's more than what I think it is. This is more. It's about white privilege as well, such as I can go shopping most of the time, pretty well assured that I will not be followed or harassed. And if a traffic cop pulls me over, I can be sure I haven't been singled out because of my race. Enlarging this, I think, as Warren Buffett has spoken to this in many places and using very similar words in each case, he calls it the ovarian lottery. In one place, he says, the womb from which you emerge determines your fate to an enormous degree for most of the 7 billion people in the world. If I had been Black, my life would have been entirely different. If I had been born female, my life would have been entirely different. No tribute to us. It just happened that way. And by us, he probably is speaking to one of his fellow billionaires in the world, of which he is probably the primary example. No tribute to us. It just happened that way. With those things in place, we could start to think about some of the applications and maybe issues. And this is a very short and idiosyncratic look, I'll tell you, as you will see. We're thinking about biases, but these are tools that we might think about. Biases really help us, I guess, codify our privileges, sort of set them in stone. And my biases, we're good people. And we know we are striving every day to overcome the biases we know we hold. But there are implicit biases too. There are unseen biases. And many of you have taken the Harvard Implicit Association test before. It's a link to it in the resources as well, but it's a tool that will help uncover unconscious biases. Those what we think, what? Really? That's me? If you've taken it before, I encourage you to take it again. You may be surprised at how your journey has taken you at this point. Presentation, how we present ourselves and how that can make us vulnerable. A cultural bio can also be a tool for self-reflection. It is a transparent sharing of oneself. It means being vulnerable, and it can be risky, or it can promote acceptance. And this includes such things as class, ethnicity, race, gender, all those things that when you're asked to fill out forms, usually at the bottom it says, choose not to share. Well, these are the things where in cultural bios, you make the choice to share those things. Performative activism, this is what really brought it together for me, with the vulnerability and putting yourself out there. This was a comment from a Columbia University student, Kayla Abrams, in an article where she shared thoughts with some of her student friends. Performative activism. The day we made woke cool is the day we opened ourselves up to merely acting out the motions of activism to gain social capital rather than engaging in real action. What you say on social media must be the exact same things you are saying and doing in real life. And here I'll pivot to my own take on this. And I want to say here that I will make mistakes. Here today, I will make mistakes, but the mistakes I make, I hope will not offend, and I hope will be taken as an example of my own flawed journey towards where I'm going. It is a place of being vulnerable. We do the best we can until we know better. Then when you know better, you do better. But knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do. And I will say that what we do can be very risky. The cultural bio is one of my vulnerabilities that I'm sharing today. And I forgot to ask Paul to read the extension after my name, and you will have read it possibly on the website announcing the program. It says Linda Secretan, PCC, NBC-HWC, and then in parentheses, she, her, hers, and residing on Shoshone Bannock land in Idaho. So this is the first time, and it might not seem like a big thing to some of you who may have done this, but I've never used my pronouns and acknowledged I'm a settler on the ground where I live ever before. And it felt, I'll tell you some of the reasons it made me feel really vulnerable. But then a couple of days ago, I will share that I signed up for the WBEX pre-conference and I used the same cultural bio. I don't know if I'm brave enough to keep it up there or not. We'll see. But where does this vulnerability come from? Well, first of all, and maybe foremost, I don't know, I don't want it to be just performative. You know, is this just like signing a petition? Is this the easy thing, the easy way to be active and to show that I'm woke? Is it like holding a placard in a march or just posting something that I agree with on social media? But then it makes me wonder, if it is performative, can it nevertheless contribute to awareness and change for the future? So does it maybe create a moment for other people to stop and think about language and the power it has to change behaviors and attitudes? I really think back, and I guess it will date me, but thinking back to the derision that the term firefighter caused when we were first encouraged to use it. But firefighter was a term that created a space for change, and it created a space for acceptance of women in the firefighting field, which they never had before. Language is powerful. And with that, we can circle back to the Coach's Challenge. And I've retitled it, not a Coach's Challenge, but the Coach's Challenge for whichever of us are willing to take it on. And it is hard, emotional work. It is a labor of love. When we think back to that Coach's Challenge, what were her assumptions? She identified his culture, she said, and his religion from his name only. His use of male privilege, well, did she stop and ask, was he afraid? Was he intimidated? She was a coach with 2 PhDs and vast experience in the field. So was he afraid? Had he ever been coached before? So did he make some assumptions himself about the coaching relationship? Maybe assuming it was an unequal partnership where he was the dominant partner as he was in his workspace as a leader? Or was it just his personality rather than his gender, his religion, his culture? Maybe it was just the way he presented himself, his own self in the world. And finally, what about her fear? Her fear was unnamed and subconscious, and she would admit to it only all these years later. So the question that I ask now is, can we approach potential clients with a coach's curiosity, with love and acceptance, before we decide that we're not a good fit? We're ending with a lot more questions than answers. Where can we be proactive? Where can we place what Alice Walker calls our own small stone of activism? In our marketing, are we limiting possibilities by not reaching out across race and culture to advertise our services? What actions do we take when ready to move the needle on realizing the aspirations of our organizations and ourselves? I really thank you for your kind attention and for creating a safe space for me here. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Laura.
Thank you, Linda. That was fabulous, fantastic. And I appreciate you modeling what we're talking about here in the vulnerability. I'm going to, okay. Whoops, got some things interfering here. And of course, this worked before, right, everybody?
Yes.
Paul, is it? Oh, there. My apologies. I had something blocking my view. Okay.
It looks like you got it. Great.
All right. Thank you. Sorry about that. So thank you, Linda. I think you have set up a beautiful segue to what I want to talk about. And this is this idea of a parallel journey with coaching and diversity, equity, inclusion. Because I think that there's a lot of similarities as we do this work and as I do this work in both as a coaching professional, executive coaching, and also doing diversity, equity, inclusion work in organizations. So there's a shared foundation and many of these things that Linda already mentioned. And one, as we know in coaching, is discovery is key as we're working with our clients, as is it also key in diversity, equity, inclusion. It really is about discovering and learning, showing up with a great sense of curiosity and staying curious, and asking questions and really seeking to understand and learn. Also very paramount is trust. Having trust in the relationship, whether it be a coaching relationship or whether on any topic, or certainly as we explore and we learn regarding our biases, as we share our experiences, we have to have trust established to do that openly, again, in both spaces. And then speaking truth. Being able to speak one's truth, whether it be with your coach, if you're in a coaching relationship, or talking about any topic, or it's absolutely around diversity, equity, inclusion, because it is very, it's a personal journey that sometimes is very difficult. And speaking truth is sometimes a great challenge. So in my experience, I just want to share a little bit about what I am seeing, and certainly as a result of a lot that has been occurring in our society all over the world, actually. And Linda shared some key dates going back to Mr. George Floyd, which I think really was the beginning of a different movement. So leaders in organizations from a executive leadership coaching standpoint is the fact that they are being looked to by their employees to speak about diversity, equity, inclusion, to really take action in their organizations and say, and be able to speak to what is going on. Not only are they having to talk about or being expected, and in some cases they want to, as leaders, want to speak about diversity, equity, inclusion on a personal level, which is really where it begins. What does it mean to me as an individual? What is my experience? But also being able to speak to it at an organizational level. What are some of the systemic biases that occur? What are some of the barriers for individuals? What is our culture as an organization? Is it inclusive? Is it equitable for all? Is it creating a sense of belonging for everyone beyond just being included? Do people really feel like they belong? What's going on at a community level? Whether it be speaking to it from the standpoint of this is where employees live, in an organization, the customers and the people who we serve. So it gets very complex for leaders in organizations, and some of the things that they have to unpack and understand, particularly in a coaching relationship. This is what I have been seeing, the topics that are really top of mind and critical for leaders. And additionally, as Linda mentioned, is leaders are on their own personal journey. Okay? It is very personal. It's very individualized. We all have our own experiences. We have our own histories and challenges and struggles. So it is a personal journey that leaders are trying to embark on, while they're also having these other needs from their organizations to, speak up and speak out. There's a lot of vulnerability. Many leaders are feeling that, they're unprepared. They're not able to speak eloquently or as informed about the topic. And I think what I am certainly seeing, and in my work and with organizations, is that it's not so much that people are saying we want, it to be perfect. We're extending grace. I'm seeing many people extending grace and recognizing we're all going to stumble. We're all going to struggle. We're all going to make maybe mistakes. And as Linda shared, and I would say the same, that I'll make mistakes. I will maybe say something that does not, land well with everyone. And we have a very diverse group participating today. And so there's always that risk. There's always that possibility. And I think if we all are, start from a place of good intentions, and also we extend grace to each other, then that will help us in our journey to learn and grow together. The other thing that is also very key and top of mind for leaders, and being very sensitive as I work with them, is they certainly do not want to be perceived as being disingenuous as they speak up and out about diversity, equity, inclusion. So that is another area that I find that leaders are seeking help to ensure that they can find their voice in that is authentic around this topic. So as a coach, kind of switching gears again, I think we're all in a parallel once again. Not only are we helping and working with our clients discover and travel their journey, we're traveling our own as well. So for us, it is important to recognize what are our personal biases, because we all have them. So recognizing what might they be for us, as the story that Linda shared, there were some personal biases there that were very likely unconscious biases that had been developed. So doing our own work to recognize what those are. Then also, what is the lens that we're looking through? We all have our own personal view and experience of the world and how we see things and how we perceive things. So being conscious of and mindful of what we see may be different than what somebody else sees and what somebody else experiences. And so recognizing that there are very many different realities, right? We all live in the same world, but we don't always all experience it in the same way. So recognizing and acknowledging that so that we can show up for our clients in the best way possible. And then also a reminder, and I think that this is a kind of a guiding principle for us as coaches anyway, as a foundation is, but as a reminder, particularly as we work with diverse clients, is to be comfortable being uncomfortable, particularly as some of these issues around diversity, equity, inclusion come up. they may be uncomfortable. We all have, things that we are, kind of sharing or experiencing that, may be unfamiliar or uncomfortable to our coach. So just being prepared and being open and being present. Also being willing and able to have difficult conversations with diverse clients. There have been several studies conducted and research in which they have found that coaches who are at times coaching clients who are different than them, particularly if they are of a different race, may be a little bit more hesitant to be very open and kind of put forth some questions or some things to explore because they are afraid that they might offend or they might say the wrong thing. So we need to be able to have those difficult conversations and not hold back with our clients. Otherwise, we are not serving them as well as we could. And then once again, also doing our own work, increasing our awareness about diversity, equity, inclusion, just as a whole. And there's resources that Linda shared, and I will share others, as will April. But finding, where is your awareness and how can you learn more and explore more? Understanding your own personal journey. Where are you as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion, just as Linda shared her experience and her journey, a little, insight of that. And then very importantly is for us not to impose our DEI journey on our clients, where we are as individuals will be very different than where our client is. So being very mindful to be present and be there to support them in unpacking what they need to unpack and discern what they need to discern and not imposing ours on them. Here's some just quick resources to share some more reading. We will make this available. There's some fantastic TED Talks that you can also watch. And so I would encourage you to just explore what you can by way of resources. So now I am going to turn it to April, who is going to now share some more specifics around data.
All right, there we go. I started and didn't unmute. The classic COVID thing, you're on mute, right? Okay, are we okay? Give me a thumbs up, Paul, if folks can see. Okay, excellent. Well, hello, everyone. And many thanks to my colleagues, Laura and Linda, for doing a great job and giving us this incredible foundation to be able to better understand our increasing our own awareness of DEI and working with our clients as well. So for my segment, it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to share with you some research I've done. And admittedly, up front, my research is focused on women and women of color, and it's on their workplace experiences. So no question, you're going to see that influence in what I present. I just want to acknowledge that up front. And I realize that diversity, it goes beyond just somebody's gender or the color of their skin. I realize it can include everything from the country of origin to your hairstyle or your lifestyle, visible piercings and tattoos, disabilities. I mean, it can be a number of different things. So I hope I don't offend when I kind of group all of the various aspects into just using the term underrepresented groups. So for me, that's how I want to share that today. I hope that is okay for folks. So the research that I've done on women and women of color and the organizations, there are power structures that have kept women out of positions of leadership and authority. And often those systems that are in place are the same systems that impact members of underrepresented groups. So with today's theme of raising awareness, I just want to quickly explore 4 different assumptions, and I'm going to call them myths or facts, and that's how I'm going to present them to you. And there's some things that are out there, and I'd like to explore with you some ideas on how you can support both for yourself and for your clients, increasing your awareness. Okay, so let's get started. First off, myth or fact. Women don't apply for positions because they don't feel qualified.
I would agree.
So some of you may have heard this before, and it may be that women only apply when they have 80 or 90% of the qualifications. Well, I actually want to dispel some of that as a myth. The research shows that women actually do see themselves as qualified. The reason they aren't applying is because experience has taught them the whole process is usually biased towards men, particularly white men. Dr. Tomas Chamorro Premuzic has strengthened our suspicion that hiring decisions often aren't based on competence. Instead, hiring panels are usually focusing on the person that shows the most confidence. And as a result, those who are in underrepresented groups sometimes may feel like they're just a checkbox, that they're a token in the candidate pool, but that they or that their application for the position isn't being taken seriously. This leads to distrust in the whole process. And that is what impacts a person's willingness or unwillingness to apply. So knowing that, how does that impact you as a coach? Well, maybe it's just being aware that this uncertainty on whether or not the process is fair could be coming up for your clients. And so exploring that with them. With executives that you coach, you may want to explore with them, how can they intentionally diversify their hiring panels, include more women, more people of color, people of different backgrounds or beliefs. Make sure that the hiring panel represents the diversity that you're trying to bring into your organization. Executives also may want to think about trying to diversify the candidate pool and looking at the language they use to do that. One example that Paula Deely shared that I loved is at the bottom of the recruitment that they had, there was this additional statement. If your experience looks a little different from what we've identified here and you think you can rock this role, we would love to learn more about you. What a great, welcoming and inclusive message. I love that. So anyway, that's the hiring process. So what does the research say about other aspects of the workplace? Second one, myth or fact. The workplace experience is different for men and women. Actually, women, and particularly women of color, do experience the workplace very differently than men. In fact, most underrepresented groups have a different experience in the workplace than white men. And the difference isn't based on people's behavior, it's on how they're treated. They receive less support. They have fewer opportunities for growth assignments. In fact, research shows that supervisors of women usually have fewer conversations with them around career development opportunities than they do with men on the same team. All of this was reinforced by research I recently did on the experiences of women and about their leadership journey. And more than half, 52%, cited having to navigate biased attitudes in their organization. These women also shared that they felt alienated, that they were socially excluded. And all of that combined just made them feel like they didn't belong. A woman that I'll call Gretchen shared a story of early in her career when she was given an assignment to work with another agency on a specific project. And the agency representative was a gentleman. So her and her supervisor, who was also male, went to meet with this agency rep, right? And kind of do the kickoff meeting and go over what she would be doing. Well, during the entire meeting, the gentleman from the agency refused to look at her, wouldn't acknowledge her. And if she asked a question, he would turn to her supervisor and answer to him, just refused to look at her. So as they were wrapping up the meeting and they're walking out, Gretchen's supervisor turned to her and he said, you know, I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm not going with you anymore. He's got to learn how to work with you. You're competent, you're capable. This is your thing. You've got this. I believe in you and I know you're going to do a great job. So while, you know, thinking about what the supervisor could have done in the moment, probably a lot of different things, but for Gretchen, her perception of the experience was that she saw somebody with privilege observe some biased behaviors and then used authority to be able to show support for the person receiving the bias. And that helped her. She shared that it helped her work through her feelings of not belonging, of having her supervisor do this. So you may want to think, how do you want to respond when you see bias happening? Or for your clients, maybe you want to explore with them strategies on how they could navigate or address bias in the workplace. Okay, number 3, myth or fact. Women don't speak up in meetings because they lack confidence. What do you think? Myth or fact? Well, maybe a bit of a trick question. It's a bit of both, right? There's the assumption, though, that women don't speak up because they lack confidence. What's happening with that assumption, though, is it's how women, and particularly how women of color, are treated when they do speak up. They're often ignored or their ideas are shut down. Well, how does that play out in meetings? Dr. Adam Grant, he's an organizational psychologist. He's author of the book, Think Again. He talks about how meetings are actually just full of monologues of men dominating the conversation. And he points out that women really face a harsh reality, that it's better to stay silent and be thought polite than to speak up and jeopardize their careers. I mean, wow, jeopardize their careers, that's pretty harsh, right? Well, I would offer that that can also be the case for many members in underrepresented groups. So overall, we are less tolerant of women who exhibit high levels of self-confidence. And when women, particularly women of color, display confidence, it's usually perceived and judged much more negatively. So stepping back, you as a coach, how does that matter? Well, I guess, first of all, it's helpful to be aware that this is a legitimate dynamic that some of your clients may be facing. So what do? Well, maybe you can strategize with them ways to approach meeting dynamics. An example that I've used with some of my clients is maybe talking with others beforehand. If they want to make a presentation or a proposal during a meeting that's coming up, meet before the meeting with different folks who they know will be there and get their intake, maybe process any concerns that they may have. And that can be a way that when they get to the meeting, they already know kind of where their support is, almost counting your votes before you go into the meeting, right? Also making an agreement with somebody that will be at the meeting to make sure that if one of them starts talking, the other will support that they not be interrupted and that they have the space to share their idea. And then, most importantly, get credit for their idea. Okay, last one. Myth or fact? Women experience imposter syndrome more frequently than men. What do you think? Well, this is another one that's kind of a little bit of a dual thing, right? I guess I need to step back and just say, what is imposter syndrome? If we were to try to define it loosely, it's doubting your abilities, right? Feeling like maybe you're a fraud. I was fascinated by this, and particularly by it saying that women suffer from imposter syndrome. And when I went back to the original research, I found that it was basically on a group of women. And it just focused on fairly common feelings of discomfort or maybe being anxious or self-doubt. And it turned it into this thing that was unhealthy and abnormal. And it just kept it associated with women. But the truth is, we all feel a little, uncertain at times. So yeah, it was a catchy title, Imposter Syndrome. But syndrome, I think, downplays how common that feeling is. And it treats it like an ailment or an illness, and it just isn't. I know often when we're feeling self-doubt, we keep it to ourselves. And so we assume we're the only ones, right, that have these questions about our abilities. But what's damaging is when you have that self-doubt and then it's reinforced in the workplace in particular with repeated experiences. So when you're socially excluded, when you're shut down or ignored, or when others continue to take credit for your ideas, all of those things can exacerbate feelings of self-doubt. So you consider that the research shows white men are able to find role models who look like them, often who act like them, And rarely, if ever, do folks question their competence or their leadership ability. So all of that kind of reinforces how confident they are. However, underrepresented groups experience just the opposite. They have to deal with microaggressions and bias that the other guys just don't experience. And I get that some organizations are in denial and they just want to say, you know, this is a meritocracy. We treat everyone the same. That's just not true. Inclusion happens or doesn't happen in very subtle ways every single day. Those microaggressions can be embedded in what behaviors are ignored or endorsed in an organization. So imposter syndrome, considering that, you know, all of this context, saying that women or that folks just lack confidence and it's imposter syndrome, I think we need to realize that there's more going on. There's a bigger context there. And the one thing that I'll say I don't like about the term imposter syndrome is it tends to put the responsibility, the onus on resolving the issue on the person rather than the organization. So, quick recap. As coaches, part of our role is to challenge our clients and to explore with them their assumptions. And I agree with both Linda and Laura that this has real relevance within this sphere of coaching and within diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it starts with each of us being open to surfacing and exploring our own biases and assumptions. And as we do that, my hope is that we're each empowered to respect and appreciate what makes each of us different. I've included the resources here that I've cited in the presentation. And here is the contact information for myself, Linda, and Laura. Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn the time over to Paul.
Thank you so much, April and Laura and Linda, for your insights and very interesting, provocative thoughts. Makes us all think about our roles as coaches and as people in society, frankly, and what we need to do to help others. We'd like to now begin our question and